Hi, good morning. Today, my lecture is going to be on climax ecosystem. That's a word I am really obsessed with. Uh, Most of the ecosystems they have achieved climax ecosystem. Uh, Oceans, ponds, tropical rainforest, tundra, other ecosystems they have achieved climax ecosystem where everything is balanced. That's the shortest definition of climax ecosystem. Everything is balanced, and that ecosystem is going to survive for another 2 million years. So that is called the climax ecosystem. Anyway, climax ecosystem is the last stage in ecological succession, an ecosystem in which populations of all organisms are in balance with each other and with existing abiotic factors. There is a balance among living, that means the biotic world, and also there is a balance between biotic and abiotic, that is non-living. The living and the non-living are perfectly balanced. Prophet Isaiah talks about it in the Bible in the chapter 11 verses 6 to 9. Such a beautiful example what climax ecosystem is all about. I'm going to read this beautiful quote to you. The wolf will live with the lamb. The leopard will lie down with the goat. The calf and the lion and the yearling together, and a little child will lead them. The cow will feed with the bear, their young will lie down together, and the lion will eat straw like the ox. The infant will play near the cobra's den, and a young child will put its hand into the viper's nest. They will neither harm nor destroy on all my holy mountain, for the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. Prophet Isaiah, the book of Isaiah, chapter 11, verses 6 to 9. I love this text. This text summarizes what climax ecosystem is all about. Everything is balanced. There is peace and harmony throughout the land. Not only for 10 years or 15 years, another 2 million years or 10 million years. That stability, that balance is known as the climax ecosystem. So in short, I can define climax ecosystem. It's an ecological community in which populations of plants or animals remain stable and exist in balance with each other and with their environment. A climax community is the final stage of succession, remaining relatively unchanged until destroyed by an event such as fire or human interference. So I'm afraid the human interference is the cause of disturbing the climax ecosystems. Every climax ecosystem is plundered and exploited. It is not by the natural event like fire or tsunami or earthquake or volcanoes. It is the volcano known as human being. His interference costed every ecosystem on the planet Earth. According to classical ecological theory, succession stops when the ecosystems has arrived at an equilibrium or steady state with the physical and biotic environment. At this point, the community is stable and self-replication. Barring major disturbances, it will persist indefinitely. This end point of succession is called climax ecosystem. These are the following characteristics of climax ecosystem. Number one, the vegetation is tolerant of environmental conditions. Number two, it has a wide diversity of species, a well-drained spatial structure, and completely balanced complex food chains. Number three, the climax ecosystem is balanced. There is equilibrium between gross primary production and total respiration, between the energy used from sunlight and energy released by decomposition, between uptake of nutrients from the soil and the return of nutrients by litter fall to the soil. Number four, individuals in the climax ecosystem stage are replaced by others of the same kind. Thus, the species composition maintains equilibrium. Number five, it is an index of the climate of the area. The life or growth forms indicate the climatic type. There are different theories regarding the nature of climax ecosystem. There are three schools of interpretations explaining the climax concept. They are as follows. Number one, monoclimax or climatic climax theory. This theory was advanced by Clemens in 1916 and recognized only one climax whose characteristics are determined solely by climate, meaning climatic climax ecosystem. The processes of succession and modification of environment overcome the effects of differences in topography, parent material of the soil, and other factors. The whole area would be covered with the uniform plant community. Communities other than the climax and related to it are recognized as subclimax, postclimax, or disclimax. Number two, polyclimax theory. Polyclimax theory. This theory was advanced by Tansley in 1935. It proposes that the climax vegetation of a region consists of more than one vegetation climaxes controlled by soil moisture, soil nutrient, topography, slope exposure, fire, and animal activity. Number three, climax pattern theory. This theory was proposed by Whitaker in 1953. The climax pattern theory recognizes a variety of climaxes governed by responses of species populations to biotic and abiotic conditions. According to this theory, the total environment of the ecosystem determines the composition, species structure, and balance of a climax community. The environment includes the species responses to moisture, temperature, and nutrients, and the biotic relationships. Availability of flora and fauna to colonize the area, chance dispersal of seeds and animals, soils, climate, and disturbance such as fire and wind. The nature of climax vegetation will change as an environment change. The climax community represents a pattern of populations that corresponds to a change with the pattern of environment. The central and most widespread community is the climatic climax community. There are different types of climax communities. There are climatic climax community, edaphic climate community, catastrophic climax community, disclimax community, pre-climax community, and post-climax community. So let us discuss briefly about each terminology. Climax community, climatic climax community, known as if there is only a single climax and the development of climax community is controlled by the climate of the region, it is termed as climatic climax. For example, development of Maple Beach climax community over the moist soil. Climatic climax is theoretical and develops where physical conditions of the substrates are not shown extreme as to modify the effects of the prevailing regional climate. Edaphic climate community number 2. When there is more than one climax community in the region, modified by local conditions of the substrates such as soil moisture, soil nutrients, topography, slope exposure, fire, and animal activity, it is called edaphic climax community. Succession ends in edaphic climates where topography, soil, water, fire, and other disturbances are such that a climatic climax cannot develop. Then comes catastrophic climax community. Climax vegetation vulnerable to a catastrophic event such as wildfire. For example, in California, chaparral vegetation is the final vegetation. The wildfire removes the mature vegetation and decomposes. A rapid development of herbaceous vegetation follows until the shrub dominance is re-established. This is known as catastrophic climax. Then comes this climax community. When the stable community, which is not the climatic or edaphic climax for the given site, is maintained by man or high domestic animals, it is designated as disclimax or disturbance climax or anthropogenic subclimax, meaning man-generated. For example, overgrazing by stock may produce a desert community of bushes and cacti where the local climate actually would allow grassland to maintain itself. So the last is pre-climax community and post-climax community. In certain areas, different climax communities develop under similar climatic conditions. If the community has life forms lower than those in the expected climatic climax, it is called pre-climax. A community that has life forms higher than those in the expected climatic climax community is post-climax. Pre-climax strips develop in less moist and hotter areas, whereas post-climax strips develops in more moist and cooler areas than the surrounding climate. Thank you. Goodbye.